So, hi everyone, just write shortly in the chat if you can all hear me and see me well to make sure that everything what will be said today is heard. Okay, perfect. Perfect. I see people can hear us and see us. So very warm welcome from Galileo International Impact Investing Center to our interview today with a special guest, Mr. Ben Banerjee, on the topic Our World in 2030. And it will be a short session, half an hour. So we will try to hold the time. Just for your information, you will be provided the recording after the session. And also, if you have questions during the interview, please write it in the chat. So Q&A session will happen after the interview, and we will choose the most sophisticated and challenging questions for Ben. Great. Then I suggest we start right away. And first of all, I'd like to introduce our guest, so Ben Banerjee. For those who don't know him yet, he has a very long track record in impact investing industry globally and of course in Switzerland. He is a serial entrepreneur, respected thought leader on impact investment and climate change, expert on investments and anticipation of crisis. He is also speaker at international events on impact investment, climate change, and economical and social impacts of new technologies like blockchain. He's advisor on a few world leaders and governments on macroeconomic, financial, and investment policies, and guest of honor to President Obama second inauguration ball. Last but not least, Ben is also our member of Galileo, which I'm very proud of, and he's also our ambassador. So, sure, Ben, I could continue this list forever, but we need to keep it short. And I'd like to ask you a few questions before we start, as I know you also can talk quite a long time. So are you okay to keep the answers rather brief so we can address more questions?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll try that.
That's great. And a little warning before we start, because I prepared also some tricky, some provocative, and some depressive questions. So just for you to be warned in advance. And the first question will be very simple. So what is the most important that our audience should know about you, which defines your actions and engagement today?
Okay, I would start by saying thank you for your very, very kind introduction and for inviting me to this interview. I think I'll keep it summarized. What my actions today are motivated by is mainly environment, and trying to use the financial industry, which is, in my opinion, the largest industry in this sector of its kind, to save the environment and to protect the environment for the next generation. And like you mentioned, I am a member of a couple of groups. I'm a member of a couple of think tanks like the Climate Leadership Coalition, East-West Institute, and with a very, very talented team, I run the Swiss Impact Investment Association, which is primarily focused on increasing the awareness of impact investment in the Swiss financial sector. And it's also a platform where investors and businesses meet. I can go into detail with all these activities, but I think you asked me to keep it brief. Oh yeah, and I do advise a couple of governments on their impact investment policies. And by couple, I mean the Norwegian, Finns, Hong Kong, and the Faith Invest.
Okay, great. I think we keep this format. It's a good length. The next question to you is about your experience with predicting. So actually, I know that you correctly predicted a couple of major events in the past. So could you name us the most remarkable ones and how actually you could connect the dots to predict that?
I have been doing this since 1992, and that's how I also got involved with the Clinton administration. So what I generally do is I take much more variables in consideration, because most of the predictions, especially on the economical and macroeconomical things, are not taking sufficient variables, especially on the academic level. And what I also look at similar kind of events taking place in different parts of the world and learning from history, which unfortunately we humans have repeatedly proved to be not very good at. I think the real art is to find out which variable to take and which variable to neglect or ignore, because these variables can have massive influence on the flow of event. For example, Corona is a very good example. It's a completely unexpected variable which came out of nowhere, but it had an immense impact, and it still is having an immense impact on the flow of events on the worldwide level, especially economic level. And there are a lot of other variables which can take place at this moment, which is unexpected and which is hard to predict. For example, if tomorrow China tries to take over Taiwan by force, or starts a war with India, or anything
or
like
Russia.
This, it will have immense impact on the economical, how it progresses. And by the way, when I say China, I just want to clarify, I don't mean China as a country. I mean the present regime, the CPC, the Communist Party of China. Some of the very easy way of prediction, I would say, many people think, or despite of what many people think, election of Trump as the US president was quite very expected. And his actions, or what he did, the decisions he's taking, is also quite very predictable. On the other hand, our decision makers, by our I mean the Western elites and decision makers, we have been quite blind in many of our predictions. And now you ask for a few examples. For example, Brexit. I think I have been interviewed too many times on it, and if I go in detail, it will be another interview. But 7 years ago, I spoke to a lot of British parliamentarians on Brexit. And to keep it brief, I think the reason it happened in very short, I would make it the shortest possible, is that I'm from Holland. We are one of the founding members of EU. It was not hard to notice that EU was very soon transforming itself from its founding. It was supposed to be a kind of decentralized democracy. It started becoming a sort of centralized bureaucracy. It lost contact with its citizens. The whole decision-making structure became very opaque. And citizens started having the feeling that EU listens more to its lobbyists than to its citizens. So Brexit was a wake-up call. And the British had the privilege, in my opinion, to have a referendum. I'm sure in those years, in those times when Brexit happened, if there would have been a similar referendum, there is a high chance countries like Netherlands, Finland, Austria, Greece may have also ended up leaving EU. Another thing is Ukraine crisis. I remember I was speaking at a Swiss banking forum in Zurich. This was in August 2013, when I already spoke that Russia is going to move into Ukraine, sorry, not into Ukraine, into Crimea, and also the Donetsk issue. The reasons were very, I mean, now we are looking at it much after the time. It was quite obvious. One was the importance of the harbor of Crimea for Russia, the Russian fleet. Second was the mismatch of the narrative of the Western narration and the Russian narration about the ownership of Crimea. And last of all, one very important point which the Western decision makers did not really look into is how Russians saw the expansion of EU and NATO towards their border as a threat. And the last example I can say is Iran crisis. I was speaking in the Swiss-Iran Chamber of Commerce in July 2018 when I had said we should soon expect the re-implementation of the sanctions on Iraq because the sanctions were then lifted. Everybody was in a good mood, except I had the idea that it's not going to last too long. Mm-hmm. And I can go on with the list. The financial crisis, I was already in 2004 speaking about it, looking at how the mortgage market is moving in the US, especially for the lower middle income class people, that it was quite obvious that the financial products and the structured products which had been built up on the ground of those mortgages do not have a long future.
Well, that's quite impressive. So we can rely on your prediction in 2030 then, I guess. And this is it for the next question. So we are standing in this COVID pandemic situation. And of course, everyone asks themselves how the future will look like. At least let's start with the general. How the future will look like in 2030, in your opinion, in the next 10 years?
I think both the impacts will be positive and negative. I mean, I'm looking mainly at the economical point of view. By negative, I don't even want to start with the immense loss of life and livelihood the last few months we have been looking into, especially into countries with the weaker part of the societies, the old, the sick, and the poor. For example, in the countries like India. Also, another thing which I think will change drastically are the way we are living, our lifestyle, the way we are working, the way we are traveling, fashion, vacations, and also real estate diversification. These are just to name the few. But as usual, future depends on few variables which are known and which are unknown. One of the aspects which I'm very curious to know about is how long is this corona going to last? By corona, I mean the impact and the consequences and the effects of corona. How much courage do the policymakers, the present policymakers and decision makers have to push through the change and to push through the I would call it in my terms or in my wordings, the traditional business and the lobbyist unfriendly policies. How much courage do they have? And again, my personal opinion, will the policy present business and political elites finally start thinking long term? Because I think they have always been thinking the last few decades very short term.
And profit oriented.
Yes, exactly. And depending on the above, we might go for more localization of supply lines, especially in the agri sector, less use of airlines, more cautious production, less exporting of dirty production, because we in the West have been exporting our dirty productions quite a lot. And movement of real estate from commercial maybe back a lot into residential properties. I mean, these are just to list a few.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about like countries? So if you could maybe think of some continents, countries like US, Europe, Russia, India. So what do you see there happening?
I'll keep it very short. India, it's a country where I come from. I think India is moving very strongly into automation. I see far furthermore consolidation and development, especially in the agri sector, because India, I don't know if people are aware of, but India has an extremely massive agricultural sector, and in fact, its production far out is larger than the demand. If done properly, India has the capacity not only to feed itself, but it's also feed more other countries. But unfortunately, at the present infrastructure and the present supply management system, a lot is gone wasted. Secondly, you mentioned US. US, I see there will be more pulling back of production. So there will be more local production, less transfer of technologies production to countries like China, more diversification of its supply base. So maybe to avoid its dependence on one country, but spread its dependence on more countries. And I think US will keep on withdrawing its production base from China, whether Trump wins the coming election or not. Russia is very interesting because it's one of my favorite countries. It has now a golden opportunity to move away from commodity base, because since the coming down of the Berlin Wall, Russia has gone very strongly into commodities, while in fact it was a very technologically based country. So this gives Russia the chance to reintegrate back into the global economy using technology, and that you see very much in the movement with blockchain and other IT development countries. The present sanction regime, which is another of my favorite topics, I have given a lot of talks on this, has kind of been very counterproductive for all stakeholders, not only for Russia, but also for the world and for the world economy. So I sincerely hope that the Western decision makers wake up, start thinking long term, and bring Russia back on the table. About Europe, I would focus on the European Union because I belong to that. I think there will be further weakening of the internal structures and institutions. Especially, there will be movement away. I think the movement has already started, away from EU Commission and more to the national governments of the EU member countries.
I see. Thanks a lot. That sounds interesting indeed. We will see what's going to happen, of course, in the next years. But I would also wish that the countries would take pandemic as a wake-up call in some cases and change their policies and do something for the people also. Next question is actually in the finances. We all know that finance plays a tremendous impact in all aspects of our lives, right? In business, economics, and political systems. And I'm sure you've heard that impact investing market actually increased from 502 billions last year to 715 billions, which shows again that impact investing is not just a bubble, but it's really getting its place in the financial market and in our lives. So what was the impact of the pandemic situation on the traditional financial market, and which role impact investing will play potentially to transform it in the next years?
I think to start with, we have to go a bit behind or before the whole thing started, is that the corona has created an immense loss of equity, value of equity in many major, the traditional businesses, and it has also impacted production of a lot of industrial sectors, which has in fact caused that many funds and individuals have lost significant values or significant wealth, and the funds have lost their values. But to my knowledge, till now, it has been very much limited mainly to the old businesses. By old businesses, I think it's quite obvious what I'm talking about. On the other hand, it has also given opportunity to many who were able to see or foresee or foreact, and who had the cash available to act during this pandemic. For example, buying distressed properties, equities. Here again, I will point to China, because China acted very fast. It acted, in fact, so fast that today it forced countries like Germany, India, US to start implementing policies to protect their internal market from this kind of takeovers. Now I'll look to the positive side. So Finland, for example, has a very new prime minister, Sanna Marin. Since she has come to power, Finland has really started very strongly looking into impact investment and increasing the awareness of impact investment in its financial sector. One of the biggest funds in the world, the Norwegian Sovereign Fund, was hit very, very badly during this corona crisis, not only because of the loss of the value of equity, but because also of the low value of petroleum. Plus, they had to disinvest in an already distressed market to fill in the loss of the government's decrease in income, because it is owned by the Norwegian government, and to compensate and fill it for the government's expenditure. This has, I think, made them extra aware, and especially now it has a new head who is officially, I think, becoming the head. Nikolai is becoming the head, I think, in August, end of August. This has made them better realize that they have to look into long-term more future and to invest into it, and to look into the loss, which are the sectors of the market which are less viable to loss. Same is valid for Hong Kong and a couple of other governments, which I can go further into detail, but I think we are running out of time.
Yeah, let's continue to the next question, actually. And I mean, it's great to hear, of course, that impact investing is gaining momentum, but what I see, there is a lot of talking in impact investing world. And you maybe also have heard that various governmental organizations or big banks, some development financial institutions, they all announced, oh, we are going to move billions, and some even say trillions, into impact investing market. But to be honest, I find it very difficult to track this money, where it really goes, if it goes somewhere. So the question is, how can impact project access this huge amount of money? And yeah, this is the main question actually. How can we see that this money is actually acting and not just being announced?
It's a very, very good question. I completely, fully agree to what you're saying. And I myself feel very frustrated about it. The last time I was speaking to the head of the European Investment Bank, I mentioned exactly the same. There's massive funds available, only there's quite a strong mismatch of knowledge and understanding between the businesses and the funds. The issue is that this is a new sector, and we are trying to follow old traditional processes which are being used in this new sector. But both sides don't understand that impact business can be very different. I assume that most of you know the story when the email started.
I was not born maybe yet, or
no. I think you were born. I think when the email started, if I send you an email, I send the email to the post office. The post office, I bring it to the post office on a paper. They print it in an email. They send it to whichever city or country you live in. There, the post office receives it, print it out, and gives it to you. So basically, what we were doing is we were implementing the processes of postal system into the email, and that's what is being happening at this moment. So the funds, they're massive funds who are looking for projects to invest in, but since they don't know of these projects, they're investing in funds because they themselves lack the knowledge or the resources, since it's a new sector. On the other side of the not really very positive side of the story is that many financial institutions are aware of this and they're misusing the market. They are greenwashing or creating funds which are not purely impact investment funds, but the institutional investors are not aware of it and they're not fully, how do you say, they do not see the difference. So they are investing into these funds. So there's a massive mismatch going on. I think the positive side of the story is it is slowly being counteracted. The regulatory boards and policymakers are becoming aware of this situation, and there are more and more laws coming into place, especially reporting laws. I'm sure you're aware of the EU Commission is coming with a new law. Last week, the Swiss government came with the new laws. So more and more new laws and regulations are coming to keep a check and to keep a control on these kind of institutional funds which are being greenwashed as an impact. So in long term, it is positive. In long term, there is an immense growth in this sector.
Okay, so in 5 years, it will be more easy to get the funds for impact projects than nowadays, you think?
Exactly, but keep it. I just want to add, the funds are already available there. It's only there's a mismatch of information. The businesses and the project owners are not fully aware of it.
Okay, all right. That's good news, at least. Let's continue with investment side. So the traditional investors and wealth managers, they have been severely hit by pandemic. But the question is, do you think it will trigger them to protect their wealth in a sustainable manner of investment in the future and impact investing? Or maybe they will just say, as you know, as traditional investments are currently very distressed, I mean, it have been very distressed, then they just fall back on the high profit side and say, okay, I had cash, now it's distressed, I just buy the usual traditional stocks or real estate instead of impact.
You asked a good question. Your answer is itself in your question. Yes, in fact, many wealth managers too have lost severely, especially I'm aware of in Switzerland. They have been shocked to reality, and people are wondering about where to invest and how to invest, which will be more secure in the future. On the positive side, it has really created more push towards impact investment. On the negative side, there are many who have also started looking more further into the cheap and the distressed market to buy into that. So I think here the point which I put earlier is that the length of the pandemic, I think this is going to have a huge impact on the investment habits of the people or of the wealth managers. The fund managers, the established ones, especially the old ones in Switzerland, I would say the middle and the small ones, they will keep on trying to sell the same. And that's what I'm also seeing. They keep on trying to sell the same vanilla products to their clients, but fortunately the clients are becoming more intelligent. So the biggest opportunities are coming soon. It will be from both sides, from bottom up with customers and even retail customers, asking more information on their savings and pensions, etc. And top down is, for example, EU Commission is pushing through the Green Deal, which I think you're aware of, and if you're not, you can just Google it. It is to make the EU economy more sustainable. And also, for example, the head of European Investment Bank said that at this moment, they invest or lend only to businesses which are aligned to the Paris Agreement. And from next year, it is a mandatory law. They will only do that. And of course, the establishment with the old lobby group will fight back. So that's why the length of the COVID may have a big thing to say about which side wins. But I'm optimistic. I think the other side will win. The movement towards impact.
Yeah, I mean, I've got also from my clients more and more understanding for impact investing, because COVID also kind of enabled a certain consciousness shift in the minds of people. They see that such a small thing can cause big impact. So they are more open to look into new investment opportunities, especially if it's something good for the environment and for people. All right, then let's go to really Switzerland, as we are here. So maybe you've heard that 1 week ago, Swiss Federal Council, in close cooperation with many State Secretariat for International Finance, Federal Office for the Environment, and other authorities, they published a report on new guidelines on sustainable financial services. And the aim is actually that Switzerland finally wants to become leading location for sustainable services, which is, for me, who was trying to get there, also to activate them since 5 years, is very joyful and cheerful to read. The question is, do you really see Swiss financial market developing into this direction? And will we see the real change quite quick, or we will still need to wait till some people in power to retire and then giving the power to younger generation who can decide more quickly on this, making Switzerland the sustainable financial services location? What is your view on that?
I read the same Swiss, how do you call it? The
guidelines.
The guidelines which came out. I'm extremely very happy that this is coming out. Only I'm not sure about the motivation yet, because is it out of the fear of being left out and get caught up by the EU Commission, or is it due to the true intention from the Swiss policymakers to really turn Switzerland into a sustainable financial leader? This is exactly what I have been promoting since more than 7 or 8 years, that we have to make Switzerland, especially the Swiss financial sector, the center of sustainable and impact investment. I have a little bit more experience with the Swiss wealth management environment. I have worked at it, and I used to have a multifamily office myself. I think they still have a long way to go. They're still too stuck in their old ways of working, and changing fast is, in my opinion, not their cup of tea. To be honest, I would say the Swiss financial sector needs another global problem, or another pandemic, or a big hit before it really starts moving. They have already, don't take me wrong, they have already started talking a lot about impact investment and sustainable investment, but I think their motivation is still to attract new clients and get new funds. But in reality, if you really go to the deep depth of it, I think it's still a lot of window dressing. It will take some time for them to change. I can give just one example if you have time to give. Sure. One is that I know a couple of such wealth managers who went into a panic mode when the corona hit, and the only thing I was hearing is sell, 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 because they were extremely afraid that the market is collapsing and they are losing their asset value for their clients. But once the pandemic is over, now they have a lot of extra cash on their account. Question is, what will they buy? Will they learn? Will they learn from the mistakes they made from their, or will they go back to their own thing and start looking going to the market for the distressed assets and try to buy them. So in other words, go back to the same situation where they started. And I think this is where the government regulations will help. If the government comes forward and starts implementing the strong regulations, which the EU Commission is doing and which now the Swiss is doing, then I think this will, and maybe thinking out a bit boldly, I think if the government regulatory policymakers also start thinking about the protection of assets for the investors, like the US, I forgot the name, the SCC has very strong legal protection for its investors, then maybe the government can enforce the wealth managers and the asset managers to rethink their investment strategies. Especially the old-fashioned and the short-term thinking managers, as like you mentioned yourself, they will one day be forced to retire, or many of them are already facing such an immense loss of their client trust and asset valuation that they don't have much future to go on. So I think the world, by 2030, there will be a far more greater share of investors investing into circular economy and the so-called the good business, instead of in old businesses like oil producers, which not only have lost a lot of their asset value, especially for the reasons which I mentioned earlier for the Norwegian Wealth Fund, but they will also be ending up with a lot of stranded assets. I mean, if you look at countries like Saudi Arabia or companies like Shell, which are already moving away, this is already an initial start sign, in my opinion.
I see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. So it can be additional motivation for those who need some push from the government side to do something. So yeah, let's hope for that. Another question, and before I ask, I actually want to manage the expectation of people. As we said, it will be 30 minutes, and I still have 4 very cool questions which I want to ask you, and after there will be also a small present from Galileo's side. So the ones who need to leave, guys, you will get the recording, and the ones who can stay for another 10-15 minutes, you're very welcome to stay. Okay, so as you mentioned businesses, and you've seen that many businesses were hit, and also supply chain worldwide. So how do you think that will be impacted? I mean, the business sector, how business sector will be impacted in the next 10 years? Because I guess the impact will not happen right away, but it will be happening in the next years.
I think in very short term, I would say there are a couple of things. One is cost optimization. Businesses are really looking into it, and they will invest into or look into the cost optimization of especially of the production and supply line. There will be some anti-globalization movement, especially in the food sector, where people are looking more and more into their own local food production or food production in their region, and further digitization, like I mentioned earlier for India. I'll just give a couple of concrete examples. I was speaking to the governor of Hong Kong. Hong Kong has been relatively not that badly hit by Corona, because they had learned from their past experience with SARS, with China. They knew exactly how to stop, when to stop, and how to regulate their movement. But what impacted them very strongly was the sudden closure of many supply lines. Mainly for food. Hong Kong is very, very dependent on food. Hong Kong does not have enough food production of its own, and it depends on ships and transport. This impact will be felt for long. And this is just an example. There will be a lot of other countries which are very much dependent on their food. I'm not fully sure, but I'm sure you guys will check it on internet, on Google. Switzerland also requires, it's a tiny country, but has a massive requirement of food from other countries, and this will be hit. This will change. So I think food production will become more and more local. It's another point which we are thinking about, I think, which is changing, is people are thinking about diverting their supply line, and they're reduce their dependence on one country, which in this case has been China very strongly, especially because China also sort of misused its power, its major position as a major supplier to its political advantage. There are quite many examples. You can yourself Google it or check it on the internet, like forcing countries which recognized Taiwan by not offering them medical equipment and things like that. So I think this supply line will change. It will change to the direction away from China, but not that fast because of the immense government support and other reasons, which makes production in China so cheap and so easy that it will not happen from one day to another. It will really take time to divert production out of China. But I know, and I'm very well aware of the policymakers of many countries who are actively thinking about it and looking into it. And what positive I would say is that 20 years ago, we didn't even know about China being a production center. So moving in and moving out, if there is really a true motivation, it will happen. It is just the courage of the policymakers, how much can they look into it.
Well, as we are on China now, I have another question. So how do you see China on the political map in 2030? Because I'm sure all our audience heard that it started kind of invasive actions towards India, Russia, and what shall we be prepared for? And what's possible to do to avoid possible conflicts in the future with China?
I think with India, of course, it is now everywhere in the news and everything. With Russia, it is still not very much in the news. It is coming. I have had a lot of discussions with a couple of Russian ministers on this, but that's the whole story. I think it all depends on a lot of factors. How China is going to proceed with its policies, which I find quite assertive and aggressive at this moment, especially towards the countries in its neighborhood. It did not end only with Tibet. It is the South China Sea taking territories away from Bhutan, Indonesia, Philippines, India, and it's not only land territories, but also sea territories. The list is increasing very fast. Fortunately for those countries, unfortunately for Europe, we are still far away. We are not affected, or we are not so much aware of it. The only thing it hit the European news was some time back when China ignored the judgment of the ICC on the South China Sea. And once in a while, you see on the Western media about US and the freedom of navigation laws on the South China Sea and that region, which China is starting to dominate very strongly. I sincerely believe, and I'm quite sure about it, that the Western nations can here make a very strong effect if they make a stand, if they make a united stand in their moving their businesses, their investments to other countries and enforcing global laws and economical laws on China. Otherwise, I'm afraid, I wrote an article about this some time back, that one day history is going to judge the Western elites very harshly for the support and creation of the present China. And being a history nerd, what I have learned from ancient civilizations like that of India and Rome is that sometimes short-sighted decisions of few people can cause damages which takes centuries to repair. So I sincerely hope that the Western decision makers look into it.
I see. We just have, two questions, and let's switch to nature and climate change, as you are such a fan of that. So, shall we expect more pandemics and natural disasters in the future, the coming years?
Yes.
Maybe
definitely.
Just as a start.
Yes, definitely, because there are many causes for it. The deforestation, more and more moving into natural habitats by humans, destruction of nature. Yes, we have taken away natural incubation center of these pandemics, and we are spreading it out. Yes, there will be many more of them, and that it will increase, and it is increasing. What you spoke about the climate disasters, I don't think it is going to start. I think it has started already more than a decade ago. Only we are not seeing it yet because it's still far from us. We are in Switzerland, at least I'm in Switzerland. We have our lakes, we have our mountains, but it has started in countries like Bangladesh, in Indonesia, in a lot of island countries. People are really worried, and I'm in communication with them because of my position at the CLC board. This is increasing, and the pandemic, the only reason we acted so fast and we made so much resources and money available for pandemic, for like COVID, is because it hit us here right at our home. The climate change still hasn't hit us right at our home yet. So yes, humanity has to wake up, and it has to wake up from a slumber of living completely unsustainable and our very, very destructive way of life. So I sincerely hope to answer to your question that for our future generation, that I do hope that we change, we learn from this.
And then, okay, to conclude, then I come to most depressing question of the interview. So we are all living on the planet Earth, and it's like a big boat. You know, we have all our animals, humans, nature all together. Yeah, all in the same boat. And we have only 10 years officially from United Nations to achieve 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? So do you see really that human consciousness will shift fast enough so we can change our lifestyle in way of business, way of investment? Or we are just slowly going down the hill, and impact investing is just a naive attempt to change the world for the better? So maybe extinction of the humanity on this planet is inevitable.
Exactly. I would say, I would
Exactly,
again
you
start with,
confirm?
exactly. I would say, starting with a negative point of view, one point which you missed which is extremely important and which apparently still hasn't caught the attention of many people in the world, is the loss of biodiversity. It's immense. It is nearly, I read recently a report, some scientists are saying it is nearly to the level of climate change, the disaster we are facing with the climate change. So question is not, it's not about inevitable extinction or slowing down inevitable extinction, because recently I was reading another report where it says that mass extinction our sixth one has already started. So our option is not to slow it down. Our option is to turn it around. On the other hand, the positive side, never in the history have we had 8 billion plus highly intelligent, innovative species. There's
You
nothing
mean humans?
exactly.
Okay.
There's nothing that we cannot achieve if we really want to. We can create wonders, we can create miracles. We just have to work together, increase the awareness, and each of us in small or large ways, do something to protect our common heritage. At least look at our children and look what we are giving to them. So yes, there is hope. There's extremely strong hope. And we have the technology, we have the knowledge to turn it around.
I agree with you. And on this positive note, from depressing question to the positive, it's good turnaround. Thanks a lot for sharing your view on 2030, and I sincerely hope that it will help some people to act differently, and if they otherwise would do, thanks to this insights. Before we take a couple of questions, I just really want to share 1-2 slides from Galileo. As I said, there will be this little present from our side. Just a second. The technology is almost collaborating. So, can you see my screen, guys? Can you see it, Ben? Just
yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those who don't know, Galileo is obviously a strong impact investing fan. We raise awareness, provide accessible education, creating a platform to connect investors and projects. You can check our membership for different types of people and corporates. I would suggest individuals to be impact individuals and corporate impact corporates, of course. And for all of you, we will provide 30% discount if you become a member till 7th of July. So after the interview, you will receive email with the recording and discount. So you can use it. Or maybe you want to make a present to someone who doesn't know yet what impact investing is. And our next webinar will be on 12th of August 2020 on very interesting topic, behavioral insight for social startups. Check that out. It's already published. And so now we are ready for questions. We are ready for questions. I've seen one question was from Antonio. He left already. However, we'd like to answer that. What is your sense of how the investors and asset managers in the sector sense the market in a post-COVID world?
I think I did answer that in one of the questions.
Yeah,
that,
I think you did.
Yeah, that the post-COVID world, it's they have the choice. I think it's a generation gap. Number one, we are looking at the old traditional investors and asset managers and new ones. So it does give a massive, massive opportunity, and I would say really massive opportunity to everybody who is acting in the impact circle and in the sustainable circle, because the interest and the movement is moving very fast and very positively.
So guys, if you have more questions, please write it now. It's your last chance. And meantime, I just want to read a few comments. So Chris Roland, he confirms that yes, climate change has hit Switzerland. Look at your glaciers, but clearly the pain is not big enough as it's around the world. So I also noticed that obviously even in Zurich, you know, I've been in Switzerland for 14 years, and 14 years ago we had snow in Zurich in winter time. This year we hadn't seen any. So
I completely agree to this. Yeah.
It looks like you answered all the questions, Ben. So I think I suggest that if someone has more questions to Ben, please write it to our email info@iiic.ch, and we will forward it to Ben and hopefully then answer it. So thanks everyone. I wish you a great afternoon today, and yes, wish you very nice summer for the near future. And I'd like also to wish you, just a second, no? Well, one question, Ben. We are not done yet. So Ben said that after COVID, we will have a lot of reserves, but investors are not sure where to invest. Can he talk a bit more about it? Thanks. From Anna von Bock.
It's from two angles. One is the institutional investors. They are really looking, and that's one of the things which I'm also educating. At least they invite me to go and give them a talk to educate them how to look into other angles. So yes, they are investing more and more into funds and sub-funds, or into projects which clearly are very strongly, the ones which I'm aware of is where the EU funds very strongly look into is the climate change related projects, because that's quite a hot topic at this moment. And a lot of other investors are also looking at the food security for the future, so agri projects. These are the two which I myself am aware of. These are the institutions. Now we come to the wealth managers and the family offices. They are looking into projects, but that's what I explained earlier, that the problem with them is that they still are putting old values or information, standards, or trying to put the standards on the projects which are coming up now. You cannot, for example, this I have been speaking about since many years, you cannot expect or put the same valuation or expectation from a company in Africa or India as you do it to a company in Switzerland or in Netherlands. So as long as they do not change their mentality and look into the valuation, it has a different risk scenario. And very often the risk scenarios are not connected to the reality. I mean, if you look during the financial crisis, if you look at the default rate during the financial crisis, in fact, the Western businesses, the Western companies had a higher default rate than the emerging market companies. And so there's a massive mismatch of this. So that is second. And the third limit, I would come to the private investors who are investing from their own money, they're ultra high net worth individuals or high net worth individuals. There you see a clear generation gap. The elder ones who are 70 plus, they have done things their own way and they will most likely stick to it. Although they are also becoming now more and more aware, especially with the rising regulations and the risk scenario, because they are getting hit also by the risks which is coming on with investing in their traditional investment portfolios. But the new ones, the young ones, they are so much more aware. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to educate them. They are already aware of what is going on. And the fourth and the final, I would say, is the retail investors, the Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street. The awareness is increasing. Even in India, which I was very positively surprised how even Indian investors, simple, even they are getting aware of how to invest and where to invest. So, and then what do you think about the rich countries like Switzerland and America? The awareness is increasing very fast.
Yep. I have last question which I'd like to take because it is from India. It's from very Indian name, Iftikhar Patan. So are impact investors looking at India positively? And does Galileo have an India presence? This is last one to me. Not yet, but if you're interested, we are happy to consider this option to establish Galileo in India. Would be great. And Ben, then the question to you.
Yeah, I'm sure most people in the Western world knows that India is the center, the start of the impact investment. Most of the impact, if you look at the old, I'm from Netherlands, the old Dutch funds, who all started with impact investment, it all started in India. India has been, and it still is. I have a report somewhere. I have to find it. That the majority, the maximum amount of impact investment goes into India. It started with the macro lending, microfinance. Yeah, thanks for correcting me. It started with microfinance, and then it went through good times and bad times, and it also had negative impact, especially with the I don't know what something happened in Hyderabad or something long time back, which had a negative impact on the microfinancing industry. But to sum it all, to summarize it all, the investment to India is still the maximum, and it is really still where most of the investment is heading for. So India is if you look into the emerging market scale, India is at the creme a la creme because it has a financial security, it has a massive growth potential, and you have a much more impact and effect. But it is also coming down. So a lot of investments which were initially going to India 10 years, 5 years, or 15 years ago is also slowly converting to countries like Africa because people are trying to cut and paste the success stories of India into other Asian nations and into Africa. So India is still very, very, very important.
Okay, perfect. So I think with this, I'd like to finish our interview. So thanks again. Oh, the weather is getting some impact on our lives here. If you hear some thunder, I don't know if you hear it. Anyway, so thanks a lot, Ben, for the insights, and I wish the whole audience who stayed till the end great summer and all the best for long term and midterm, and all the best to you. I'm sure together we can make 2030 great for everyone, and looking forward to meet you at our next seminars and webinars. So thanks a lot to all of you, and bye from Galileo side.
Yes. Can I just add something?
Yes,
so
please.
If you guys listening, because I'll be presenting also to the Norwegian Sovereign Fund and the other governments, if you guys seriously have projects or funds which are really truly impact, because that is something which is always difficult to find, and by really impactful, I mean no greenwashing or anything. I would really love to know, and I would be interested to know that if you guys have projects and funds which I can propose or put forward to the institutional funds, because that's always a headache. We don't know that enough.
Yeah. Should we share your email with participants, Ben, to address this last question, or they can write to us and we will forward it to you?
Yeah, I think, because people who know me know I'm very bad with emails.
Okay, we take it over. So everyone who has great impact investing projects and funds, please also write to info@iic.ch and we will forward it to Ben. So thanks a lot, guys. Have a nice afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you.